Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Matt Rhule, the Nebraska Cornhuskers, slowly working their way through fall camp. And I think by far the biggest storyline that I'm getting out of Nebraska's fall camp is every morning when I go to check some of the fall camp practice notes, you just hear of another offensive weapon that is emerging within this Nebraska offense. And I think that's a massive storyline where you look at the national media and how they talk about Nebraska. A lot of the conversation has to do with the quarterback play and it improving heading into 2024, which is certainly a massive storyline. But I think a lot of non-Nebraska fans don't really realize how badly Nebraska was hurting for offensive playmakers in the 2023 season as well. And Coach Satterfield took a lot of heat for not having a quote-unquote explosive, creative, dynamic offense. I think it was really difficult for him to have that in 2023 when he had quarterback play that obviously was significantly not good enough. But I think more importantly, half the running back room goes down with an injury. Emmett Johnson becomes the running back one, a guy that was probably working with the scout team heading into the 2023 season. At the wide receiver position, Marcus Washington goes down. Billy Kemp deals with injuries most of the year, primarily relying on true freshmen at the wide receiver spot. And why that was so significant is not only were they true freshmen, but I think more importantly, there was a limited amount of plays that you can go ask a true freshman to go execute year one at the college football level. You fast forward to 2024, I think the running back room is extremely deep, but I think more importantly, really dynamic. There's a lot of different skill sets in the running back room. Then you look at the pass catch room, you kind of say the exact same thing. Want to dive into all the different contributors that we're kind of hearing out of fall camp and what this Nebraska offense might look like outside of the quarterback position. You all know we've talked plenty of Dylan Raiola over the last couple of months. Let's focus on some of the offensive playmakers that we see in this Nebraska offense. Really excited to get into it. Before we do, and as always, just want to say thank you to you guys, to the Nebraska fans. As always, this is a program that I love talking about. The amount of support you guys show the boys, it absolutely means the world. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And without further ado, let's get into this one. I want to start in the running back room, a position group that I don't think was talked enough about in 2023. It was no secret. Matt Rhule, Nebraska, they want to run the football. They want to control the line of scrimmage. You kind of see how this Nebraska room shook out in 2023. Gabe Ervin, Ramir Johnson go down very early with season-ending injuries. Anthony Grant, a guy that we thought would be a stud for Nebraska in 2023, couldn't hold on to the football. And so Emmett Johnson, who was largely the running back four on this Nebraska roster heading into 2023, kind of had to be the running back one. You dive into Nebraska's running back room heading into 2024. One, it's deep. There's a lot of guys that we trust to tote the rock for Nebraska. But more importantly, it's a lot of different skill sets, a lot of different guys that can do a lot of different things. And let's start with Emmett Johnson. Emmett Johnson is probably the most complete running back in this running back room. And I think the improvement you're going to see with Emmett Johnson, a little bit more physicality. And you can tell the pictures that we saw in spring practice and fall camp, the offseason, winter, and summer workouts have certainly paid dividends for Emmett Johnson, a guy that can make people miss at the second level, has extremely good feel at the running back spot as well. The thing that kind of lacked with Emmett Johnson last year was the physicality, the contact balance, the ability to be physically imposing at the running back spot. I think Emmett Johnson, going into year three of his career, probably gets significantly better in that aspect. And so I think you're going to see the best version of Emmett Johnson. But then you look at some of the other running backs in this room and Matt Rhule always says it, hey, we want to run the football for 75 yards in the fourth quarter. Gabe Ervin Jr., Dante Dowdle, the two hammers within this Nebraska running back room, those are two running backs that you can physically kind of impose your will with those two guys. And I think the big thing with Gabe Ervin Jr., if he stays healthy, he's one of those running backs that really is going to allow Nebraska to stay on schedule in 2024. You look at how Matt Rhule wants to operate, kind of similar to, I would think, what Michigan looked like last year, where it's 2nd and 6, and then it's 3rd and 2, and then you're moving the chains. One of the things Blake Corum did at such a high level was the consistency in terms of how he ran the football. I think that's what you're going to get from Gabe Ervin Jr. and Dante Dowdle. Those two running backs that, one, are just going to grind opposing defenses down, but more importantly, keep this offense on schedule. One of the keys for Nebraska in 2024 is keep Dylan Raiola out of those third and long situations, those obvious passing downs. If you can do that with guys like Gabe Ervin and Dante, you kind of feel good about Dylan Raiola having a successful year one as a freshman quarterback. And then the last guy we got to talk about, I think probably the star of Nebraska's fall camp within the running back room, is Rahmir Johnson. I don't think there's a single Nebraska fan that is not rooting for Rahmir Johnson to kind of have that year that we all know he's capable of. You go back to 2021, where Rahmir Johnson was probably one of the most dynamic players on that Nebraska offense. You go to 2022, he just didn't get used by Scott Frost, was going to have a much bigger role in Nebraska's offense in 2023, obviously suffers the injury. Rahmir Johnson's great in space, but more importantly, he's a lead in pass pro. And again, that's a very, very important conversation to have when you have a freshman quarterback back there with Dylan Raiola. And so you start looking at all the boxes checked. You have your pass protector. You have your third down running back with Rahmir Johnson. You have your hammer, so to speak, with Gabe Ervin Jr. and a guy like Dante Dowdle. And then you have your guy in Emmett Johnson, who's probably going to be the lead back, the guy that leads this Nebraska team in rushing yards, as kind of your all-purpose, your complete running back. I think this Nebraska running back room is extremely deep and it's diverse heading into 2024. Now you go to the wide receiver position, the pass catcher position. I think it's a very similar conversation. You have that true wide receiver one in Jamal Banks. I'm going to kind of call him the chain mover, right? When it's 3rd and 5, it's 3rd and 7. You need a wide receiver to go create some separation, sit it down in zone coverage, be that quarterback-friendly wide receiver. That's going to be Jamal Banks. You go back to last year, I think Billy Kemp was going to try to be that guy, but obviously with the injuries, wasn't really that guy. Nebraska didn't have that wide receiver when it's that money down. Who can we go to? I think Jamal Banks can be that guy. Then you look at some of your field stretchers, some of the guys that are going to provide a lot of deeper third presence within this Nebraska passing attack. Jalen Lloyd, Malachi Coleman, Isaiah Nayor, all kind of different bodies. Malachi Coleman, probably the most physically gifted of them all in terms of the size and the speed. Jalen Lloyd, obviously the speed. Isaiah Nayor, obviously the body control. You go back to Wyoming, Isaiah Nayor, the version we saw in 2021, this was a wide receiver that averaged almost 20 yards per reception in that 2021 season, was primarily one of the better deep threat wide receivers we saw in the country that year. It sounds like you're getting that version of Isaiah Nayor heading into 2024. So now you start looking at all the boxes checked and say, all right, we got our true wide receiver one. We have our field stretchers. And then you have a guy in Ja'Cory Barney Jr. who, I mean, every time you read the fall camp notes, he's making a play. I mean, I think specifically what he gives Nebraska's offense, which they certainly didn't have last year, was that wide receiver that can create with the football in his hands. Those guys that, hey, whether it's an end around, whether it's a screen, let Dylan Raiola have some easy access throws and let the wide receiver do the rest. It is primarily a couple of different ways you can manufacture explosive plays in a passing attack. One is just throwing the football downfield. We know Dylan Raiola can throw the deep ball. We have wide receivers who can work vertically down the field. Another way you can provide explosive plays is getting the football out to your guys in space and letting them do the rest. I think Ja'Cory Barney Jr. as a true freshman sounds like he can be a guy that can do that. And is the playbook maybe going to be condensed for the freshman? Yeah, certainly. But whether it's a screen, whether it's an end around, just using the athletic traits that Ja'Cory Barney Jr. has, it's going to be easy to incorporate him in this Nebraska offense. You talk about a guy like Carter Nelson. Matt Rhule just describes him as a difference maker. I am fascinated to see how he gets involved in this offense, but make no mistake about it, he's going to be used. And then a guy like Janarian Bonner, who's probably not going to be the most productive wide receiver in terms of what you look at in the box score. That being said, you talk about a physically imposing presence that can get it done in perimeter blocking. That's something that's going to be important to this Nebraska offense. Janarian Bonner can do that. And so you start looking at the pass catchers and kind of going back to the analogy we had that we used to open up this episode. You know, last year, Coach Satterfield had limited ingredients to cook a meal with. You look at Nebraska's offense heading into 2024, not only does the chef, quote unquote, the quarterback, Dylan Raiola, that's going to get better. The chef gets better. But I think more importantly, the chef has access to a ton of more ingredients than he did in 2023. I think that's another massive storyline for Nebraska. You were to ask me my biggest takeaway from Nebraska's fall camp so far, it's the difference makers and ingredients that you have on the offensive side of the football. I think the second storyline coming out of Nebraska's fall camp is the continued evaluation of that left tackle spot. I've been very vocal that I think the starting four outside of the left tackle, I feel very good about, right? The inside of the offensive line with Justin Evans, Ben Scott, and Mike Mizukua, that's going to be a really good unit. We trust Bryce Benhart at the right tackle spot. Turner Corcoran, who is coming back from an injury, and then a guy like Gunnar Gatula, who has all the traits to be a really good left tackle. I mean, Gunnar Gatula was a guy that I think Nebraska wanted to pull the red shirt from in 2024 or 2023. They kept it on. This is a kid, 80-inch wingspan, 33-inch arms, over 300 pounds. From a physical trait standpoint, I mean, Gunnar Gatula is checking a lot of boxes that you want. I think the big question mark is, and Matt Rhule said he is imposing in the run game. The pass pro needs to continue to come along. Can you get that going from Gunnar heading into 2024? I think that's a really big storyline. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of Nebraska fans are kind of leaning towards Gunnar Gatula starting this season, because we've seen Turner Corcoran at left tackle. And again, I said it the other day, I'm not saying Turner Corcoran cannot get better as a left tackle. That being said, we kind of have seen him play left tackle, and I think maybe the unknown of Gunnar Gatula might be a little bit more enticing for Nebraska fans. The last thing I want to close on is talking about the defense, specifically the defensive line, which obviously was a very good unit last year, specifically against the run. That being said, one thing that we had marked as a question mark heading into fall camp was the four-man pass rush, and Matt Rhule's talked extensively about it over the last couple of days and weeks. Can we get better pressure on the quarterback with our front four? Nebraska last year, obviously, again, very good against the run. You're going to be good against the run in 2024 with Ty and Nash on the inside. When it became third and long, when Nebraska won on first and second down, Nebraska last year was awfully reliant on sending linebackers to stimulate some pressure on the quarterback. I think one of the big storylines for Nebraska, which is going to get them better at defense overall, is, hey, can we manufacture our quarterback pressure with the front four, drop more guys in coverage, limit the explosive plays? That's one of the big question marks, and you're hearing a lot of different guys that seemingly are going to take that step. I think Prince Will U is probably the biggest name that we're monitoring. But you have a guy in James Williams, who, again, from a pure pass rusher standpoint, might be the best pure pass rusher. Does he need to come along a little bit in the run defense game? Yeah, certainly. That being said, you see so many other defenses do the exact same thing where, hey, James Williams might not play on first and second down, some of those obvious run situations. But when it comes to third and long, could you sub James Williams in, and can he be a guy that we are going to rely on to get after the quarterback, pin his ears back, and beat tackles on the outside shoulder? I think James Williams can be that guy. So that's probably my last big storyline for Nebraska coming out of camp. I think the cornerback depth, we're starting to get some answers as well. Jeremiah Charles seems like a guy that Nebraska can rely on in 2024, which is a fascinating story because you talk about pure talent, pure just physical gifts. Jeremiah Charles might be the most physically gifted cornerback outside of Tommy Hill in this Nebraska cornerback room. And to hear that he's putting it together heading into 2024 as a redshirt freshman, massive storyline. Bly Hill is working his way back. It sounds like he is either on schedule or ahead of schedule. He's practicing in the yellow non-contact jersey. You're starting to feel better about the depth at the cornerback spot, which I think is another big storyline for Nebraska. That's kind of my big takeaways out of the first 2 weeks in Nebraska's fall camp. We'll continue to monitor as it goes. We'll cut it there. Again, appreciate you guys with all the support y'all have shown the boys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later.